On January 6, 1981, 45 years ago this week, Lennon's killer, Mark David Chapman, stood in court and pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. And almost immediately, the focus began to shift, not just to who Chapman was, but to what he'd been reading, watching, and consuming. Because very quickly, this stopped being framed as just the murder of a Beatle and became a debate about whether books, films, and media could be blamed for real-world violence. You're listening to True Crime Catch-Up. I'm Stuart Blues from British Murders, joined as ever by Adam Lloyd from UK True Crime.
Hello.
Happy New Year from us both, by the way. How long can you say Happy New Year?
January the 26th. January 26th.
January
yeah.
Okay, well, we're still within that window, controversial as it may be. Regarding True Crime Catch-Up, let's get back on board. Every week we break down what's been happening in true crime, the major stories making headlines and the stranger ones that often slip under the radar. If you like these discussions, make sure you're following the show, get subscribed on YouTube if you're watching on there, and if you've got a moment, leave us a rating and a review. It's completely free to do, and it helps the show reach a much wider audience. Adam, ready for this?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I really am, because I know that whenever I go to New York, I don't go to New York lots, I've been maybe 10 times, but whenever I do go, I always head to Strawberry Fields Memorial for John Lennon. It's in Central Park, just yards from where he's shot by the Dakota buildings. And whenever you go, it's always packed, absolutely packed. So many people there. I think it just shows again, and we've seen it online these last couple of weeks, haven't we, as the anniversaries come round again. His influence is just immense, isn't it, after all those years? But let's go back in time. And when Mark Chapman was arrested at the scene, he was just 25 years old, which sometimes surprises me. For some reason, I think he was older than that. And on him was a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, the 1951 novel by J.D. Salinger? How do you pronounce it?
I would say Salinger, but I honestly don't know. I'm sure we'll get some stick either way.
JD's book he had in his hands, okay?
Yeah.
And Chapman had reportedly identified intensely with the book's protagonist, Holden Caulfield, who was a teenager obsessed with the phoniness of the adult world. And very quickly, that novel, as you said, Stuart, became part of the story. Chapman himself, he led into it. He later claimed that he would become Holden Caulfield if he killed someone, and he said he murdered Lennon so as many people as possible would read the book. But in later confession tapes, his language shifted. He then described Lennon as the biggest, phoniest bastard who'd ever lived and said he couldn't bear to let him live. He spoke about the novel as if it carried meaning just beyond fiction, almost as if it had given him permission, clarity, or justification to carry out what he did. And from the outside, I suppose, it's a neat story, isn't it? A famous man is murdered, the killer is mentally unwell, and there's a single cultural object we can point to and say, there, that's the influence, and it's all tied up. We see this all the time, don't we, Stuart, in true crime, when it's all tied up nice and neatly. But it raises an uncomfortable question, well, a number, but one in particular. Millions of people have read The Catcher in the Rye. Most find it sad, relatable, or, as I did, very, very forgettable. But almost none find it instructive, especially when it comes to violence. So is the book actually relevant? Or is it focusing on a way of avoiding the harder conversations about obsession, untreated mental illness, and the fixation on fame and celebrity since John Lennon's death has just grown and grown, hasn't it? What do you think, Stuart?
It's an interesting one, this. I mean, this is before my time, but obviously I'm well aware of it. Do you actually remember this happening? You may have been a nipper, but do you remember this happening?
I was very young. I don't remember it, and I don't remember I don't recall the significance of it either. It's only as I got older and realised just how massive the Beatles, and particularly John Lennon, were culturally, that it all hit me, just what a massive event this was.
Yeah, I mean, my dad is a massive Beatles fan. I'm sure many men of his age were in the UK. I feel like they were only actually together for like 5 years. I might be making that up, but I'm sure they were only together for maybe from 65 to 70. Any Beatles historians, I'm sure, will prove me wrong. But one thing that I find interesting is, as significant as this murder was, one of the most famous musicians, arguably people in the world, was murdered. I think the fact that everyone knows the name of his killer is quite telling, because normally when it's a celebrity, they're the one that's famous, right? And sometimes the names of the killers may be forgotten. But the other interesting thing is The Catcher in the Rye. The book has almost become more discussed than the murder, I
Mm.
would argue. Do you think
Mm.
that's a fair comment?
I do, but one other thing I just want to talk about before we talk about the book in more detail is those pictures of the night that John Lennon was killed, when he even spoke, didn't he, to Chapman.
Hmm.
I find those pictures, is poignant the word? No, it's not poignant. It's almost disturbing, isn't it? That this was this A-level celeb. Yeah, he was giving time to Chapman and all these people that were hanging around. He wasn't being shitty, was he? He was giving his time freely. He was behaving exceptionally well. But if we go back to the book, yeah, whenever I see it mentioned, the murder, you almost always see the book mentioned in the same article, don't you?
Yeah, it's like, oh, John Lennon died. Oh, yeah, it was because of that book.
Mm.
And I think that's quite common. But it's a good point you touch on, the fact that it wasn't as if he'd had a bad interaction with Lennon or
No,
he'd snubbed him that night. He literally spoke to him the night he killed him, right?
yeah,
And then I
did.
think he waited for him. He came back out and he shot him.
Yeah.
And then he just stood there reading the book or sat there, whatever it was. But the interesting thing again is to blame culture
Mm.
after violence. So this didn't stop with Chapman. I mean, over the subsequent decades, books and films have repeatedly been dragged into real crimes. So The Catcher in the Rye is a famous example. Horror films like A Nightmare on Elm Street, A Clockwork Orange, that's
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick, that was a very controversial film. Killers have cited media as justification quite often in the subsequent decades, and the press has often amplified those connections. In the UK, this reached a peak, for my opinion, in the early 80s. So not long after this happened with the so-called video nasties. I don't know if you remember those. These
Well,
low-budget horror tapes that were blamed for corrupting viewers,
mm.
pushing young people toward violence during the home video boom. I think there was 72 of them in total. Films like The Evil Dead, maybe Cannibal Holocaust, I think was one. These random ultra gory 80s horror films that got banned in the UK. But it offered a simple explanation, right? If someone commits a horrific act, it must be because they consumed the wrong story or the wrong piece of media. But horror films existed long before the 1980s. The 70s is arguably, for me, one of the golden decades of horror movies. And banning tapes obviously didn't stop the violence. These panics were often more about social anxiety, technology parents didn't understand, or class-based moral fears than about actual violence. Responsibility quickly shifted away from mental health, from obsession, isolation, or any warning signs, and instead landed on art. That's the obvious scapegoat. People love a scapegoat, don't
Yeah,
they?
they do.
And we're still doing it now. Whether it's films, books, video games in more recent times, or even social media, there's pressure to find a cultural scapegoat whenever a crime shocks the public, especially when there's no real motive. There has to be something. There must be. What can we pin it on? But I mean, Adam, what's your opinion on supposed controversial media influencing real world crimes?
Look, I've got no time for horror films or any films, as you know, Stuart. But I do agree with you. And the point on this always stays with me and somebody of my age, not my early 20s like you. And no doubt for many of our listeners, was the murder of James Bulger and the two young killers having watched those Chucky films first. And even when I was researching this episode today, I still thought there was a clear link between those films and the murder of James Bulger. But no, there wasn't. So this is really interesting to me. The link between the two murderers of Jamie Bulger and media violence began with a remark made by the trial judge. This judge said, "I suspect that exposure to violent video films may in part be an explanation." And this remark evolved into an application of blame to the horror film Child's Play 3 that the boys may have watched. But that link to Child's Play 3 was that the father of one of the boys, Neil Venables, had rented the video some months earlier. However, the police officer who directed the investigation found that the son was not living with his dad at the time and so was unlikely to have seen the film. And moreover, the boy, John Venables, disliked horror films, a point later confirmed by psychiatric reports. And the police investigation, which had specifically looked for a video link, again going back to your point about trying to pin something on them, concluded there was none. And this fact received very little coverage in the media. And the lasting impression is of the newspaper campaigns in November 1993, which blamed violent videos for James Bulger's murder. The violence depicted through the mediums such as film was suggested to be the cause, inspiration, and they wanted to pin James Bulger's murder onto this video. And the Sun newspaper, a paper I've got no time for whatsoever, I wouldn't read. I don't let people post links to it on my Facebook group for how they behaved at Hillsborough, among other things. But the Sun staged a public burning of horror videos, begging the public to, and get this, for the sake of all our kids, burn your video nasty. And video stores actually began to withdraw the film from its shelves in fear of outcry from the public. One video chain burnt its copies as part of the Sun's campaign. But it was later revealed 4 months later by the Merseyside police there was no evidence at all that either boy had watched that film or any like it. The snowball effect, sparked by the passing remark of the judge, turned into this national outrage, illustrating really just how strongly the British public rightly felt about the case. But there was that need to find a cause for the horrific crime. It's a scapegoat, wasn't it, for the blame? And measures, easy measures, put it in place to prevent it happening again. Let's burn the film. So when I saw this, I was actually quite shocked by how little evidence there was for something that for the last 30, 40 years I have thought was a causal reason for the murder of James Bulger. What are your thoughts, Stuart?
I mean, the Sun, first of all, just dross. Literally, it's just... I had a good way of describing it in my head earlier, which fails to come to mind, but it's a tabloid, it's just crap. And some of the stuff they've done is just abhorrent. No time for them at all, like you say. But yeah, I didn't know that connection with Child's Play 3. But for me, it's just a load of bollocks, quite frankly. I personally don't see any correlation between violent media and violent crime. I think the underlying cause generally is, and I am generalising, it's got to be something to do with mental health. It could be to do with a traumatic childhood. As we always say, this doesn't excuse people's behaviour.
Yeah.
But when there's cause and effect, nature versus nurture, for the most part, I believe nurture is the main thing. But it's interesting because I actually took part in a Young England and Wales programme. I don't know if you've heard of this. This was back in 2016 through work. A brief rundown of their website is established in 2004, this programme, and it exists to develop the communication skills and broaden the horizons of people in the early stages of their working life. So I will have... How old
what
was
went
I?
wrong with you, Stuart?
I don't know. How old was I in 2016? So I'd have been...
6, 7?
Yeah, so 90... so 89 I was born, 99, 2009 is 20, 27, let's say.
Okay.
Just going on 27, 26, 27. Now, this course, it achieves what it's trying to do through an annual series of residential courses, these last 3 days typically. So the delegates, that's what we were called, were encouraged to think and talk freely about the big issues facing us as a society. So this was up in Lancaster, at Lancaster University, and we all had to prepare a talk. And it was quite intimidating, to be fair. We had to make it last a precise length. It had to last 6 minutes. You could have a script if you wanted, but the idea was to speak to your fellow delegates. So there's about 25 of us, right?
Yeah.
And so you start talking, and you have to practice in the room in front of a mirror, get your timings down. And after 5.5 minutes, remember it has to last 6 minutes.
Yep.
After 5 minutes 30, I think they ring a bell or something. You think, right, okay. And then I think at 6 minutes bang on, they ring another bell, and then 6 minutes 30, which is the cutoff, they ring 3 bells. So it's quite intimidating. The funny thing is, I'm digressing, but when I was reading to myself in the mirror in the room, absolutely perfect. The timing was spot on. When I got to doing the thing, it did last within the time frame, but you know when you're reading and you think, shit, I'm 50% through here and I'm only a minute in. That's what it felt like. The reason I bring it up is because I did it on...
Let me stop you there. I'm sure our listeners here would have loved to hear about the bell. I mean, I can hear them all telling their partners these anecdotes this evening over dinner, can't you?
I can, yeah. I mean, this stuff might bore you, Adam, but I think it's interesting. Do you know what I mean? You're a guy that doesn't even like films, so what does your opinion matter?
Very true.
I did this talk on video game violence and its impact on real-world crime, so very relevant to what we're talking about. And my argument was that it was a load of bollocks. Not in those words, of course. I just don't believe in it. I grew up as a youth watching horror films. Friday the 13th was my favourite franchise. I've watched them all on videotape from a youngster. You know, I was younger than 18, younger than 15. Has it had an effect on me? I mean, I've not been violent to anyone. I've not killed anyone. So I think from a personal experience, I think it's nonsense. But as you know, I'm a huge, huge horror film fan. You don't have time for any films. I was watching Rear Window the other day from Alfred Hitchcock, which is more of a thriller, but it's a brilliant film. And I just thought Adam would think this is the most boring thing he's ever seen. And it's one of the best thrillers ever made because it's just fantastic.
But look at this, Stuart. So I think of Grand Theft Auto. How many people play it over the whole of the world? And I think that pretty makes your point. There's a lot of parents say it's too violent. But when I was growing up, it's slightly different. A lot of parents said Grange Hill was a bad influence. So it shows how the world has shifted in the last 30 years or so. But not everyone that plays Grand Theft Auto is triggered by Grand Theft Auto, are they?
No, it's a video game.
Yeah.
People know it's fake. Do you know what I mean? And like GTA 6 is coming out. It's been delayed and delayed and delayed. It's a big hoo-ha and there's loads of memes about it. That's coming out. It's going to be the biggest selling game of all time, just like GTA 5 was when it came out. And I think it's a good outlet, personally. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff in, what's a good word I can use? Communities that communities where there's less opportunities, right? And crime rate is high.
Yeah.
You'll hear stories of people getting involved in sport, whether it's the local community centre. People will do boxing. You'll see famous boxers. If it wasn't for boxing, I would be dealing drugs on the street.
Yeah.
That it's an outlet for them, right? It lets them get the aggression out. I think in a way, video games like Grand Theft Auto are similar, because wouldn't you rather someone think, oh, imagine if I just ran over loads of people in a car or went on a shooting spree? Wouldn't you rather them just get that out in a game? I know you might think that's a concerning thing to hear, and I get it now that I've said it out loud, but you know it's a game. There was a controversial mission once in a Call of Duty game where you had to shoot a load of people in an airport, like civilians. And it was really controversial. It's a memorable mission that I think it's Modern Warfare 2, I think it was from. I think it was called No Russian, actually. That's how well I remember it. And I think in further games, there was either a warning put on or it was omitted from a different version, something like that. There was definitely a warning on it. And that caused a big hoo-ha because, you know, that wasn't killing baddies. That was killing innocents, children involved as well. I just don't think that would inspire someone to do it, personally. It's my opinion. You might disagree with me, people, but that's what I think. I just don't see the correlation other than it being an easy out, a scapegoat. And how can you blame a film about a puppet that kills people on one of the worst crimes that I will still refuse to ever cover?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And also the warning thing, it doesn't make me laugh. That's the wrong word. Do you use a warning at the start of your podcast, Stuart?
I think I used to. I used to have an intro that I did.
I think it's patronising. So what's my podcast? What's yours called? British Murders. Well, what do people expect it's going to cover? It's not covering reviews of Panto in Basingstoke, is it?
No. I mean, a friend of mine who's published a novel, he's dead against trigger warnings, especially in books, which, again, I get. The only time I'll mention it sometime, and this sounds daft because it's about human lives being taken, but a lot of people get triggered by animal cruelty. I'll normally forewarn people if I'm going to be discussing that, or domestic abuse as well. But I just feel like it's pertinent to them.
See, I think that's even more ridiculous. I mean, I'm totally against animals being hurt in any way, shape, obviously. But then you describe some of the worst murders that have ever taken place.
Yeah,
but if a beagle gets its paw hurt during the episode, which we don't want, we've got to put a warning out so we don't get triggered. When you think about it, it's crazy. And this, I think, in a way, it brings us back to another discussion that we've spoken about a lot, because our friend Mark, our good friend Mark from Seeing Red podcast, he's got his new podcast coming out this next week, isn't it, Stuart?
I think it's the 12th. The 12th. What date's that?
What's it called?
What are we on today?
Dead Famous?
Dead Famous. So it starts on, as you listen to this, people, next Monday, I believe, is the 12th. I believe it starts with 3 episodes.
Talking about celebrities that have died. I think the first one is the death of Caroline Flack.
I think that's over on the Seeing Red Patreon, even for free members now, I think. And he's dropping 3 episodes on the 12th. I don't know what the other 2 are, but the first one he's leading with is Caroline Flack.
Now, Mark is someone that Stuart and I hang around a lot with when we're out at social events.
I thought you were going to say hate then when you said...
Well, we don't like him very much, do we? Obviously. But
Mark's a very smart guy and a lovely fellow.
I'd say he's one of the nicest blokes you'll ever meet, isn't he? And he's great company. But one of the things about his podcast, Dead Famous, is about media, culture and celebrity. The same we've been talking about today. And really, the whole discussion about the influence of media and culture, like the John Lennon and the Catcher in the Rye, it plays into how we talk about famous murders themselves, specifically when the victim is a celebrity, but even more so now in our celebrity culture. And a few weeks ago, Stuart, you, I, and the whole of the world, really, we were shocked by the murder of filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle. You texted me the second it happened, not the second it happened, but soon afterwards to alert me to it. That the couple, as you recall, were found stabbed to death in their home in LA, and their son, shockingly, has since been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Now, we could speak for hours about various celebrity deaths, but let's leave that to Mark. But I know one in particular, there's one that you always reference, Stuart, when we talk privately. And it's not perhaps as well known here in the UK as it is in the US. And that's the murder of Phil Hartman, isn't it?
Yeah, Phil Hartman... He was a well-respected and much-loved comedian, especially over in America, who appeared regularly on Saturday Night Live, that famous live sketch comedy show over there, but who I, growing up, and I'm sure many others listening or watching, knew as the voices of Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure on The Simpsons, which was huge in the 90s when I was a nipper. He also starred in Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which arguably is the best Christmas film behind Home Alone. I'm sure you don't have a favourite because you don't watch films, of course.
I've got a very tight top 20 shirt, but I'll tell you another time, yeah?
Well, you said you've only watched 5 in your life, so one of those is a lie.
Yeah.
Anyway, 49-year-old Phil Hartman was tragically shot and killed in May 1998. So at the height of Simpsons fame, he was actually killed by his wife while he slept, before she then turned the gun on herself. Now, his death underlined not just the tragedy of domestic abuse, but the role that untreated mental health struggles and substance abuse, they were all factors, can play. I mean, were you aware of this case, Adam, apart from discussions we've had?
No, I'd never heard of it. And some of the other big cases in Hollywood as well have really struck me. In particular, Sharon Tate, who you will know, she was killed by the so-called Manson family in 1969. And also the tragic death of the young actress Dominique Dunn in 1982. And both of these sparked wider conversations about safety, threat, and also, pertinent for this conversation, how the media frames those losses. Because these high-profile cases can quickly bleed into the public imagination, and they have done. In some instances, they become symbols of entire eras or social anxieties. Can be 60s cult terror, 80s video nasties, 90s comedy tragedy, or even family violence, like the most recent one, puts it firmly in the public eye. Let me ask you this, Stuart, though. To what extent do you think the way we cover celebrity murders shapes our understanding of crime itself?
I think it's difficult when there's someone famous involved, because there's something inherently interesting about celebrity deaths, or the death of someone who is known more than just the local person on the street. It's interesting because my missus doesn't listen to podcasts or my podcast, nothing true crime, not documentaries, but obviously we've all met Mark at Crime Con. She said she probably will listen to his podcast, even though it's true crime and a lot of it will be to do with murder, but because it's someone famous, it almost in a weird way feels closer to home, because these people become part of our lives weirdly, whether it's through TV, whether it's through a film or music or media that we consume that has someone in it. If something happens to them, I don't know, it feels like, I can't say it feels like a relative's died, but do you know what I mean? It also reminds us that if this can happen to them, it can happen to anyone, right?
Well, I found that I was much more moved than I should have been by the tragic loss of the One Direction star last year when he died
Liam Payne.
when he died in Argentina. I mean, I listen to the radio or podcasts as I go to sleep, and it's one of those weird things. I think it hit about 3 a.m. It came on. I actually woke my wife up and said, "Look, I can't believe it. Liam Payne's just died." And she's like, "Why are you waking me up? I'm trying to sleep." But is that shock that someone that, I don't know Liam Payne. I wasn't a big One Direction fan, but someone who is so well known, and it just leaves it back to John Lennon. Legions of people in shock, aren't they? They just can't comprehend quite. And it does, as you say, it brings the reality home that life is precious, isn't it? And it can finish.
You've nailed it on the head there. I think it reminds you that life can end in an instant for anyone. It doesn't judge. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care that you're famous. Anyone can die at any time.
Yeah,
at anyone's hand.
And a happy new year again, all our listeners.
Happy New Year, people. Hope you have a good one. Prosperous 2026.
A safe one.
A safe one, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's at this point where we end with our patented animal story. Now, I've got one for you here, people. It's far from the light relief comedy ones that I usually share. It's not a famous dog, but come back to trigger warnings. I want to warn that many of you who have pets might find this particularly distressing. I felt it worthy of mentioning that. I'm happy to give a 3-second trigger warning. It's no skin off my nose. Adam would rather just let you suffer, but that's just Adam all over for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So across the UK, there have been a number of truly disturbing cases in which our beloved pets, not you and I, but our as a country, cats and dogs mainly, have been subjected to horrifying cruelty. And there was one case in particular that caught my eye, Adam. It's that of Stephen Bouquet, I'm guessing it is how you say that, looking at the spelling.
Bucket.
Keeping up appearances, love it. Who terrorised the seaside city of Brighton between October 2018 and June 2019 with his, you can only describe these as diabolical crimes. He ruthlessly slaughtered 9 cats, inflicting unimaginable violence on 7 others. So this guy, a former Royal Navy gunner, was only finally brought to justice after a CCTV camera set up by the owner of one of these animals, these cats that he'd killed, which caught him in the act, believe it or not. Now, I've not seen the footage, I've not sought out the footage, but I'm sure it's disturbing to view. In it, apparently, he can be seen stroking a cat quite calmly before viciously stabbing it.
Oh, dear.
Now, this reminds me of the infamous cat bin lady. Do you remember her?
I do.
She was struck, she put a cat in a bin or something. Do you remember that story from a few years back? In this case, he was jailed for 5 years and 3 months in July 2021 after he was found guilty of 16 offences of criminal damage in relation to the cats, as well as possession of a knife. Now, a reminder for anyone that isn't in the know that animal cruelty at that time was still classed as criminal damage, which just sounds like a horrible term, right? Criminal damage in the UK. But I think since then, there's been some updated sentencing guidelines regarding animal cruelty offences, because after it was published, the Animal Welfare Sentencing Act of 2021 was introduced. I think they brought in some more specific charges for animal cruelty. But yeah, isn't that weird? Criminal damage as a term. I've seen that in cases before where it's referred to as criminal damage. That's all you can get them on. No different to, smashing a garden gnome, which isn't that strange?
Feels very cold, doesn't it?
It does. I'm glad they've introduced the new legislation. I can't elaborate on what it is, but hopefully it's a bit more moving away from the coldness of that. I just want to end the episode, and this is something that I think is worth doing. I just want to remember those 9 cats, if I may. Just want to name them for people to hear. So, Hendrix, Tommy, Hannah, Alan, Nancy, Gizmo, Kyo, Ollie, and Cosmo. So those were the 9 felines that sadly lost their lives. We both own pets, Adam. I don't have cats. I think. Do you have a couple of cats, right?
Yeah, we've got 5 cats, and I think it's important.
5 cats.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
More
2
than a
dogs.
couple.
I think it's important that you do name them because we know, don't we, as pet owners, well, if that's the right word, owners, just how much these animals mean to us. And I know that when our last Dalmatian died 6 years ago now, you don't want to feel that their life is in vain. You want to remember them, don't you? They were so important. They meant so much to you. So I think these cats you've mentioned, I think it's absolutely right you mentioned them. It's just what horrendous crime. And I know we all know, don't we, the link between potential serial killers and people harming animals. I mean, this guy could be out in what, 2.5? Well, he's probably out now, isn't he?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, 5-year sentence he got, which was back in July 2021. So yeah, he's probably out now.
So I can guarantee he's going to be troubling the courts again, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of the animal harm for serial murderers comes when they're kids, right? So to do it as an adult, it makes me wonder, well, what did he get up to as a kid? What would trigger this? Do you have a bad interaction with a cat one time? I just don't get it. What about the sentence, though? That's something we always discuss, perhaps naively, given our lack of knowledge or experience in the area. But 5 years? Sound about right?
No, sorry. You know that I'm usually anti-long prison sentences. I'd have given him a whole life order. Get shot of him.
So the same guy who wouldn't have remanded the 2 men on an arson charge wants to give a whole life order to a cat killer.
Right.
It doesn't want to give trigger warnings for pet cruelty in an episode. Make it make sense, people. This is what I've got to deal with now every single week. This guy.
Do you think I could replace Lammy as criminal justice minister? What do you think?
You could replace him with a brick, and I think you'd get more logic out of it, to be honest. Some of the stuff I'm hearing about his decisions at the moment are just absolutely shocking, but we won't get into that.
No.
We won't discuss that here. We are going to leave that there for this episode. If anything we've covered today got you thinking, or if there's a story or topic you think we should dive into next, please do let us know. We'd love to hear from you. The best way to do that is to drop a comment on YouTube or join the Facebook group to get involved in the discussion. We do drop new episodes every single Wednesday, so make sure you're following on Spotify or wherever you're listening. Get subscribed on YouTube, hit follow so you don't miss an episode. And if you enjoyed it, you might as well leave a review, right? Or a rating. Doesn't have to be long. Just say, this is great. As long as it's 5-star.
Don't say the show's a mess. That's just for your show shirt, isn't it?
Yeah, that's just for my show, yeah. But if you do that, it's free, right? It's free. Love that. And it helps other true crime fans discover the show. Just want to end again by saying Happy New Year. Thanks for catching up with us. We will see you next week.
Cheerio.